Hello, fellow aviation enthusiasts. My name is Ron Timmermans. I'm one of the many hosts with the Florida Aviation Network, and I'm so delighted that you've returned to be with us for segment 3 of the Florida Aviation Network's Plane Time broadcast. We're broadcasting live and in the clear from the Gizmo Production Studios in Oviedo, Florida, and we thank them for letting us use their facilities this day. We've had a great presentation earlier this morning, if you've already caught that, with Mr. Bob Jex, hosted by Ben Coleman. Learned a lot about Florida aviation regulations, and an update on so many things with aviation. The third segment now is with my good friend and colleague, Dr. George Bartuska. He's a well-known person and an enthusiast in aviation. He's been on our program many times. He's known as the weather guy. So, George, I was briefing for a flight instruction sortie I have scheduled for this afternoon. Somewhat unique forecast for the afternoon in Central Florida. Low clouds, few clouds, warm temperatures of course, but no thunderstorms today. That was really unusual for a summer afternoon in Florida. And so, I'm thinking probably next week when I do another sortie, there's going to be the chance of thunderstorms, vicinity thunderstorms, or heavy thunderstorms, or whatever. I'm sure I got a lot more to learn about thunderstorms. George, what can you tell me and the rest of our audience about thunderstorms that we should know?
Okay, Ron. Well, good observation. The reason we're not having thunderstorms as usual is Hurricane Ernesto that is battering Bermuda right now with 85-mile-an-hour winds. And that situation is pulling all the moisture away from the east coast of the United States, so we don't have the typical thunderstorms that we normally have in the summer, but I guarantee you we'll have them again next weekend. So today we're going to talk about thunderstorms. For those of us in Florida, we have, just so the rest of you watching this that aren't in the Florida area, we have a fantastic thunderstorm situation where almost every afternoon in the summer we have thunderstorms. And today we're going to learn about that. First, I want to tell you up front that meteorology is an incredibly complex subject. Atmospheric thermodynamics, which is what I'm going to talk a little bit about later on, usually takes one semester. I'm going to touch on it. And here we go with slide 2. First note to you, the audience, thunderstorms are incredibly dangerous to people and aircraft. The required simultaneous atmospheric conditions, preconditions, are especially common in spring and summer in North America. Here's another thing to keep in mind. We can wake up in the morning, not a cloud in the sky. By noon, the clouds will start to form. By the afternoon, we can have thunderstorms, we can have tornadoes, we can have all kinds of things. And by the evening, all the clouds are gone. It's just a unique phenomena of meteorology. Now, thunderstorms contain a dangerous assortment of severe weather hazards, including the possibility of tornadoes. These hazards can include lightning, hail, turbulence, wind shear, and icing. I'm not going to talk about icing much today because in the past we've done several sessions just on icing. There are an estimated 40,000 thunderstorms every day worldwide, with the United States experiencing a significant amount of those. Thunderstorms normally alter air traffic plans because they're typically too high to fly over. I'm talking general aviation. Corporate pilots and airline pilots may be able to fly over them, but they're normally too dangerous to fly through, especially or beneath, and normally too large to fly around. Thunderstorms have caused many accidents and incidents which have involved every kind or type of aircraft, from small general aviation aircraft to large transports, including military, cargo, and airliner service. The turbulence within a thunderstorm, including the shear associated with severe updrafts and downdrafts, have destroyed aircraft in flight and led to multiple fatalities. And while we're on the subject of updrafts, for the people out there who are paraglider pilots and hang glider pilots that I used to be back in the 70s, there's a phenomenon called cloud suck, where people have actually been sucked up in a thunderstorm. And there was a woman in 2007 in Germany who got sucked up into a cumulonimbus cloud all the way to 32,600 feet. The only way she survived is her paraglider collapsed as it froze, and she free fall down to about 10,000 feet, when evidently the ice melted on her paraglider and it reinflated, and she survived to tell about it. But she was wearing a digital RF linked GPS transmitter and altimeter, so we were able to get that. Now, if the whole emphasis of what I'm talking about today is if you're flying and you look out the window and you see that, or you see that, a full-blown thunderstorm in progress, this is what should be going through your head. Because unfortunately, we have lost so many aircraft and people to thunderstorms, and that's why we're here today. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is what's in the FAR AIM and what's in the most recent FAA advisory circular regarding thunderstorms published in 2013. Number one, there's no known correlation between the physical appearance and the severity of turbulence and hail in a thunderstorm. In other words, you can't tell anything by just looking at it. And I'm telling you, you've got to assume it could kill you. Airborne weather avoidance radar is, as the name implies, for avoiding severe weather, not for penetrating it. And the next time we get together, I think in October, I'm going to be talking about airborne weather radar. Severe turbulence, hail, and lightning can be experienced up to 20 miles away from severe thunderstorms, which is why the reg says stay 20 miles at least away from thunderstorms. There are situations where lightning has gone out 35 miles from a thunderstorm, so give them a lot of room. Next, no flight path through an area of strong or very strong radar echoes separated by 20-30 miles or less may be considered free of severe turbulence. And that goes for visual too. If you're flying and you see two cumulonimbus clouds and you think you can go right through the middle of them, you're going to experience severe turbulence. METAR reports don't include a code for severe thunderstorms, so you have to know what to look for in the wind speed and the rain, etc., and we'll be talking about that. Avoiding thunderstorms is the best policy. A 180-degree turnaround may save you and your passenger's life. There are some other pilots who say if you just have entered the thunderstorm, then turn around, because you may not make it out the other side. But the FAA's recommendation is turn around right now. Don't land or take off in the face of approaching thunderstorm. A sudden gust front of air turbulence could cause you to lose control. NEXRAD radar mosaic imagery shows where the weather was 15 or 20 minutes ago. It takes time for scanning and processing and transmitting. Not where the weather is right now, and I'm going to go into this in great detail next time. Be sure to advise air traffic control that you are deviating for thunderstorms and remind ATC that you're resuming your original route later on. Remember to initiate a PIREP if you can, if you experience unique conditions of turbulence, hail, icing, etc. And if you can't navigate around the storm, divert to a ground runway and wait for the storm. Avoid get-there-itis. Every time not every time, but most time when we read about an aircraft incident where there's a fatality, somebody was trying to get somewhere, more so than aviating, navigating, and communicating. Okay, now we got to flip the coin. What happens if you get stuck in a thunderstorm? What happens if, for whatever reason, you find yourself in one? Number one, tighten your seatbelt and shoulder harness. Number two, make sure the pitot heat, carb heat, and jet engine anti-ice are on if you have gas turbines. Establish reduce airspeed recommended in the pilot operating handbook for turbulence, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. Turn up the cockpit lighting to maximum light to counter the fact you're going to have lightning bolts outside and they could temporarily blind you. Keep visual acuity on the instruments, and so avoid looking outside. Allow your altitude, your airspeed, and your heading to fluctuate a little. Don't fight it with the aircraft. You could damage the aircraft. Once in a storm, don't turn back. A straight course is the fastest way to go. So that's one recommendation. The other recommendation is if you can make a 180 and get out of there, do it. Now, I said look at the pilot operating handbook for recommendations in turbulence. This is a handbook for a Cessna 172R, and I blew up that line. Maximum recommended turbulent air penetration speed depending on the weight of your aircraft, is between 82 knots indicated airspeed and 99 knots indicated airspeed. Now, where are these thunderstorms? We're coming from central Florida, very close to that little red circle that's down towards the southern end of the state of Florida, where we have 100 thunderstorm days a year approximately. Florida is the thunderstorm capital of the United States, but we're not the thunderstorm capital of the world. That's over in Central Africa. But also look near Arizona and Denver, Colorado. There's a severe occurrence of thunderstorms there also because of the mountain ranges. Way out in Seattle, they might hear thunder 5 times a year, but it's primarily, can't think of the right word, the southeast is the worst part of the United States anyway. Now, we can't talk about thunderstorms without talking about lightning and lightning fatalities. So you can look at Florida, we have 51. Well, we have a combination of afternoon thunderstorms in the summer and a high population content. And you can see Texas has 19 fatalities, but they're a large state. This is the outline for the state of Florida itself. We are normally in the middle there in Polk County, where I think it says 25 fatalities. But if you go down to West Palm Beach County, you can see it's 29 fatalities, and 30 and 34 down in Broward County and Miami-Dade County. And what does lightning do besides potentially hitting you on the ground? It hits aircraft in all kinds of different ways. Now, if you can hear thunder, you're close enough to be struck by lightning. 20 years ago, we had this idea that you would see lightning and you would count how many seconds it took to hear the thunder. We don't do that anymore because you're leaving yourself vulnerable to get struck by lightning. Once again, if you can hear thunder, you're close enough to get struck by lightning. When cumulus clouds rise to around 10,000 feet, an electrical charge starts to build in the cloud and lightning is possible. There must be ice in the cloud to start the charge for lightning. When a cumulonimbus cloud reaches 20,000 feet or more, a huge charge can build, allowing a bolt of lightning to hit the ground, releasing a deadly electrical shock. The lightning bolt itself, the part we see, is actually going from the ground up, but it doesn't matter. If it strikes you, it strikes you. Warning: a person's hair can stand on end shortly before a lightning strike occurs. Stay away from tall objects, trees, flagpoles, or open water and open areas. We see on TV on these golfing competitions, when starts to rain, the first thing the people do is run under a tree, and unfortunately, that's where they can get injured by a lightning strike. Begin CFR. Understand it's safe to touch a person if they've been struck by lightning. They don't retain any kind of a charge. If the person is not conscious, does not have a pulse, and does not appear to be breathing normally, use an automated external defibrillator, an AED, if you've been trained on it and if there's one at hand. Okay, good. So we talked about lightning. We have to. Now, how do we know everything that we know about thunderstorms? Well, prior to World War II and say prior to 20 years ago, we had a lot of planes of all kinds that would crash due to turbulence and lightning. In 1940, in Lovettsville, Virginia, the Penn Central DC-3 carrying Senator Lundin from Minnesota died in a crash along with 24 others. And there wasn't much left of the wreckage. And since then, there were all kinds of crashes. And during World War II, there were all kinds of crashes because we had to go through the storms for combat. Well, after World War II, the United States Weather Bureau, the Army Air Corps, which eventually became the Air Force, the University of Chicago, they got together and planned a project to take planes and purposely fly them through thunderstorms. At first, it was 1946 to 1947. At first, they set up outside of Orlando, Florida. The instrumentation was all down in St. Cloud, Florida. And that was the first year, and the second year was in Ohio. They used Northrop P-61 Black Widow aircraft. These were the first aircraft specifically designed as night fighters with radar in 1942. They had a maximum speed of 366 miles per hour at 20,000 feet with a ceiling at 33,000 feet. All these planes were All these planes were staffed with volunteers. They took all the armament, all the weaponry, everything off. All they had on them was instrumentation and a movie camera to take movies of the instrumentation. There was a pilot in the front and a meteorologist in the back. And they took these airplanes and they flew them into thunderstorms at 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25,000 feet. And this is a screenshot of the video that's on YouTube. All the movies that were made about the Thunderstorm project are available on YouTube. And from that, we got the first idea of understanding of updrafts and downdrafts that occur in a thunderstorm. And they start out on the left there with the cumulus stage. Now, if it only becomes a cumulus cloud and doesn't grow, no problem. There's still going to be some turbulence inside. But if they start to become a towering cumulus and start to grow in altitude, then eventually they will become a mature thunderstorm. The mature stage starts when the rain comes down, and at the end we have what's called the dissipation stage. But don't let that word fool you. Even microbursts and macrobursts can come out of the dissipation stage. So those are pictures out of the original report. These are more modern pictures. We can see on the left now we have towering cumulus stage. Air is heated at the surface and becomes buoyant. It rises. As it rises, it cools because of lower barometric pressure. And as condensation takes place, the clouds are generated. Then when the rain starts, as the rain comes down, it pulls the air with it, and we start to get downdrafts. And we start to get downdrafts mixing with the updrafts. Notice in this case, the storm is mostly vertical, straight up and down. And when that happens, the storm will tend to rain itself out and destroy itself during the process. The cloud droplets coalesce to form larger droplets. Droplets become heavy enough to fall as rain. Descending air creates downdrafts. Then in the dissipation stage, downdrafts cool. It's the surface air eliminating source of lift, and the storm rains itself out. But like I said, we can have microbursts here. And one question people often ask me, or I often ask them, what do you think happens to these mammoth thunderstorms? They literally rain themselves out and evaporate. They disappear, but not overnight. One more picture. The cumulus cloud with the thermal updraft, the mature stage with updraft and downdrafts, and the dissipating stage with downdrafts. We can have microbursts or macrobursts in the mature stage or in the dissipating stage. And in either the cumulus or mature stage, we can have light aircraft and paragliders sucked up in the storm. Now, let's talk about thunderstorm formation. Got to have three ingredients. First, we got to have moisture, preferably in the lower and mid areas of the atmosphere. There's got to be an unstable atmosphere. In other words, when something starts to rise, it's got to be able to continue to rise. And I'm going to talk about that a little later. And there's got to be some kind of a trigger or a lift mechanism to get that air moving up. It could be a frontal boundary, like a cold or warm front, or it could be the gust front coming out from another thunderstorm right next to it. Now, what are the lifting mechanisms? Here in Florida, we have, I'm going to show you in a minute, we have convergence where we have sea breeze generated by the Gulf Coast, the Atlantic Coast. They merge over Central Florida. I'll show you that in a second. Mountain ranges. Anywhere there's a mountain range, the storm is going to start to go over the mountain, and as it does, it's going to be lifted, it's going to cool to the dew point, and it's going to rain itself out. Then we have what glider pilots refer to as thermals. Over Nebraska, anywhere, the sun heats the ground re-radiates the air into the, re-radiates the heat into the air, and the air starts to rise. And finally, fronts, cold fronts. Any kind of frontal boundary can create a thunderstorm, although the cold front is the most prominent. Here is the situation in Florida where we have these two converging sea breezes coming in over the state. When the sun heats the land heats up quicker and the air starts to rise and the air gets pulled in over the water. So we have this moist air. And as we can see in the bottom picture, we have a sea breeze on the Gulf Coast, we have a sea breeze on the Atlantic Coast, and we end up, if there were no other weather systems happening at the time, we'd have this straight line down pretty much down the middle of the state of Florida, and we would have thunderstorms right down the middle of the state every afternoon in the summer. But we do have other weather systems, and if there's a dip or trough in the jet stream, all this can affect what's going to happen with that. Now here's an illustration of a cold front. I'm going to move through some of these quick because I want to get to the meat. I want you to remember lifted condensation level, level of free convection, and equilibrium level. Now depending on what source you're reading for information on thunderstorms, there are different definitions. I'm using what's in the FAA Aviation Weather Book, which was just updated in 2022, and you can get that as a free PDF on FAA.gov. So, single storms, the small cumulus clouds, can have severe weather, limited to brief isolated downbursts, some small hail, heavy rain, and weak tornadoes. Although tornadoes are very rare coming out of a single storm. But it's moderate to high danger for aviation. There's a typical single cell. One cell that's eventually going to rain itself out. You can tell because the storm is vertical, straight up and down. Another couple examples of single cells. Now we have multi-cells. This is the most common thunderstorm that occurs in the Midwest, where severe weather occurs as downbursts, small to moderate size hail, occasional flash floods, weak tornadoes. Definitely moderate to high danger to aviation. What happens in a multi-cell is you have these cells continuing to go through the cumulus, mature, and dissipating stage. Cumulus, mature, and dissipating stage. And that downdraft in the dissipating stage creates an outflow boundary that can serve as the lifting device for the next thunderstorm. And here we have one, two towering cumuluses. Next to them is a mature and then dissipating, and this can go on and on. A single cell can last for 1 to 3 hours. A multi-cell storm can last all night long. And then we have the granddaddy of thunderstorms, the supercell. The supercell has a mesocyclone, which means it is a rotating storm and has a rotating cell inside. And everybody wonders, how can that happen? We're going to show that today. Here's that rotating cell. And so if you were to enter that storm, you would be encountering that, but that's just the beginning. Where does that come from? The outflow of the storm creates a horizontal rotating vortex shown in the upper left-hand corner, and that gets sucked into the storm as it gets bigger, and initially it becomes that vortex in the center, that megacyclone. But if there's shear in the upper atmosphere where the storm gets tilted, now it's pulling up inside the storm, just like it is here, and now there's a forward flank downdraft and a rear flank downdraft, and they're able to suck up more of these rotating vortexes. This is a view of a supercell from the top. You can see in the very middle there, it says main updraft. So the air is going up in the front, but it's coming in the middle, but it's coming down in the back and it's coming down in the other area. And this is how it's illustrated in books. Very complicated to understand, but the yellow is the updraft. The blue on the right is the forward flank downdraft. The blue on the back is the rear flank downdraft. And at this point, we're going to show a video animation of what that looks like. So here, it's initially sucked up in the storm, the first horizontal vortex, and we'll let this keep going, and a wall cloud gets formed. Most people think the wall cloud is coming down. It's actually one of those vortexes being sucked up to create another part of something that eventually is going to become a tornado. And let this go. So now we are established with that mesocyclone, and we're waiting for the next downdraft to create another rotating horizontal spinning vortex. Here we go. So we got the forward flank downdraft, and it could be considered a macro or a micro burst for aircraft, and it's going to start something spinning on the ground. It could be linear like a roll, or it could be like a donut. And that is going to get sucked up into that mesocyclone also. This is from the forward flank downdraft, and it's going to potentially create a roll cloud or shelf cloud out in front of the storm. There it is. It's now going to get sucked up again into the storm, which amplifies what's happening with the mesocyclone that's in the storm in the first place. And you can see now the wall cloud is starting, and now the rear flank downdraft, which we're going to see in the next image, is going to create yet one more vortex on the ground. This is an example of tornado genesis, where the tornado is actually forming ahead of time. If you watch real careful in that view, you can see the funnel cloud start to come down right there. It's starting to generate a tornado. There it is. That's a funnel cloud, which will be a tornado. And then the last thing that's got to happen is one more vortex is going to be formed from the rear flank downdraft. That's what you're seeing here. The air hits the ground like a microburst and spreads out, has the potential to create a donut or a linear vortex, which one more time is going to get sucked up into the mesocyclone of the supercell, and that is going to become the tornado. Okay, and like I said, this is the way everything you just watched is illustrated in books. Here's another graphic illustration of it. And only got a couple minutes left, but obviously hail is a problem. Hail is a process of ice getting recirculated in the storm and refreezing and recoating with ice. There are macrobursts and microbursts. Macrobursts are 2 miles or more in diameter. Microbursts are 2 miles or less in diameter. There's much training into what happens to a pilot flying into a microburst. First, the wind speed increases, and if the pilot hasn't been properly trained, he or she would pull back on the throttle to slow down the fact that there's too much wind, and then they hit a dead wind from above, and eventually they get a tailwind and they crash in the ground. But today we have low-level wind shear warning systems. So wind shear, a wind direction or speed change over a vertical or horizontal distance, it's significant when it causes changes to an aircraft headwind or tailwind. And that's why we're going to have, why do clouds have flat bottoms? That's what I'm going to have to talk about next time. Just a quick review. The amount of water vapor that air can hold depends on the air temperature. Warmer air, more moisture. The dew point is the temperature. Air must be cooled to become saturated or at 100% humidity. The lapse rate is the rate that the air cools as it rises. Air cools as it rises because of decreasing atmospheric pressure. Atmospheric stability is the resistance to vertical movement, whether it's up or down. Latent heat is the amount of heat released or absorbed during a pressure change, during a phase change of condensation and evaporation.
George Bartuska, thank you so much. That was a quick overview, a semester's worth of education condensed in 30 minutes. George, no one else can put that much information out to all of us in that short amount of time.
Good.
I appreciate it. If there's some takeaways for you and me as pilots and amateur weather persons, it is avoid thunderstorms. Don't get in them. Avoid them by at least 20 miles. Don't take off into a situation where there's a thunderstorm nearby or try and land in one. Go find somewhere else to land where there's no thunderstorm. Expect thunderstorms in Florida in the summertime, almost every afternoon, and be wary of them. And remember, clouds suck. You've heard it first here on Florida Aviation Network. I'm so glad to learn about that, George.
And let me show one more thing real quickly. That video we showed came from this. This is from the Great Courses. It's called The Science of Extreme Weather. You can buy this from the Great Courses. It's the best video on weather I have ever seen.
Okay, thanks, George. Good to have you. Thank you so much for joining us on Plane Time number 22. We'll have another one of these in October, so come join us. I'm Ron Timmermans with the Florida Aviation Network. My guest, Dr. George Bartuska. Thanks for joining us. Tune in again, Florida Aviation Network.